engaging students in other campus constituencies as OER advocates and advocates for openness in all of its forms. And I'm joined today by Ethan Zenak from the Student Public Interest Research Groups and Nick Shockey, the director of the Right to Research Coalition. And I'm Nicole Allen from SPARC, the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition. We're going to do today's panel session as sort of a panel. I'll ask some questions of Nick and Ethan. And I invite you all to ask questions, ask for examples, give examples to the extent that you're interested. But to just give some context, the student aspect of OER is really important. It often gets left out of the equation. You know, we focus on OER for students, right? Students are why we develop OER, it's why we use OER. But their voices are often left out of conversations about OER. And these two organizations, the Right to Research Coalition and the Student PIRGs, have worked really hard to engage students not only to be part of the conversations, but actually drive them on college campuses across the country and the world. So with that, I'm going to turn it over first to Nick to talk about his work with the Right to Research Coalition and for just an overview, and then we'll ask some questions after each of those. Nick?
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. So as Nicole said, I'm the director of a student organization called the Right to Research Coalition. And we're an international student organization. We're about 4 years old. We were founded in the summer of 2009 by 6 student organizations that sort of looked at this issue of open access to research and all the frustrations that students had in getting access to research journals, and saw sort of the potential there was with online distribution of open access research journals. Sort of coalesce around what we call the Student Statement on the Right to Research, which is a statement of principle saying that, you know, with the internet, these academic research journals really can and should be free to anybody that wants to have access to them. And then it calls on universities, on research funders, on professors, and on students themselves to take steps to make the research literature freely available. So in the 4 years, we've grown tremendously. We started, as I said, with 6 student organizations, mainly based here in the US. But since then, we've grown to well over 70 student organizations from all around the world. And those 70 organizations represent about 7 million students in over 100 countries. And we've done sort of a lot of work to date. I think most meaningfully, we've arranged over 1,000 individual meetings with the staffs of policymakers, primarily in the US and Canada. And as Nicole mentioned, sort of the bulk of our work's been really focused on open access to research journals, so not really as much in the OER space yet, though our membership's really starting to transition in that direction. So in the few minutes I have here at the beginning, I just want to talk to you a little bit about some of the really interesting success stories that we've had in sort of getting our members involved, and successfully promoting open access at the institutional level as well as at the national level. So at the institutional level, I think one of the most exciting sort of victories that we've had was actually in Kenya. The University of Nairobi this past December implemented an institutional open access policy, which essentially requires that all of the research articles that are produced at that campus to be made freely available online through their institutional repository, so that anybody can get access to the articles that the faculty there produce. And this was a policy that had been in the works for a while, but really wasn't moving at sort of the proper pace, and the students actually got really, really involved. There's an organization in Kenya called the Medical Students Association of Kenya that we've been working with for 2 years. And in 1 week last year during International Open Access Week, they educated nearly half of all Kenyan medical students about this issue called open access and why it's important, and also engaged a lot of the administrators of the individual sort of medical faculties in Kenya. And so that really helped sort of pave the way to getting this institutional policy passed last December. But that's only sort of one illustration. We've seen similar movement, for example, at the University of Colorado Boulder here in the US. Ooh, suddenly blinded by the light. And at the University of Colorado, a very similar situation where librarians and other sort of supporters of open access have been pushing for a policy for a number of years, not making as much progress as they would like. And then when the student government there got involved, within a year they had a policy statement on open access, thanks in large part to the energy that the students brought. Then sort of lastly, at the institutional level, I'll mention that earlier this year in May, the Stanford School of Education passed the first of a kind open access policy where the PhD candidates there actually voted an open access policy on themselves. So all graduates, all PhD candidate work that's produced at the Stanford School of Education will be made freely available online through a policy that they passed themselves. And so it's really exciting to see students actually start to vote to put these policies in place for themselves. So these aren't just policies for faculty, but for students as well. So that's sort of the institutional level. At the sort of national and international level, we do quite a lot of work as well. We got students deeply involved in this February's policy memo supporting open access to all federally funded research in the US that some of you may have heard of. This was something that had been in the works for 4 years, and there was a petition petitioning the Obama administration to institute an open access policy for all federally funded research that was put into place last summer. And luckily that's succeeded in its goal of, I think, getting over 50,000 signatures in 1 month's time, thanks in large part to a lot of student efforts to get students to sign on to this petition. And then I think of particular interest is the students actually got an op-ed published in the Washington Post right after this petition was successful, calling on the administration now that the petition was successful to take meaningful action. And I think the most interesting thing about this is that there were sort of the highest level open access advocates trying to get a similar op-ed published in the Washington Post, and they were turned down because it's not that interesting when open access advocates want to write a piece about how great open access is. But when you have the presidents of 2 major American student organizations approach the Washington Post with this story, it was immediately accepted and published within a week. So I think that really sort of speaks volumes to the power of the student voice. So that's some of the highlights of what our membership's been doing around open access, but they've sort of started to naturally see sort of the synergies and benefits of open educational resources as well. And so we've worked with a number of our members to get active in promoting OER, most notably in Canada, where our member, the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations, has got involved in the province of British Columbia's open textbook policy and was present at the Open Textbook Summit earlier this year in British Columbia. And also another one of our members, the Athabasca University Graduate Student Association, put out a white paper sort of outlining what Canada could be doing to promote OER for the benefit of students as well. And so we've sort of naturally seen our membership start to move more and more into the direction of OER, and we hope to incorporate that more formally into the work that the Right to Research Coalition does. I'll turn it over to you.
Cool. Thank you. Wow, that is bright. I'm going to talk from over here safely on this side. But yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name is Ethan. I work with the Student PIRGs. Stands for the Public Interest Research Group. It's a really long name, back from the 70s, I'm sorry. But we're a nationwide student advocacy organization. So we were founded by students to work on behalf of the public and on behalf of students to stand up to powerful special interests in the government. Nowadays, we have campus chapters at colleges all across the country, from Connecticut to California to Texas to Wisconsin, all over the place. And those students on those campuses work together as volunteers, as activists, to pool their resources and become a more effective lobbyist and advocate for student populations. The other great part about it is that they hire full-time staff, organizers, and advocates, staff to help them develop their campaigns and actually be more effective in their organizing efforts. So a lot of the times when we think about issues, we always come back to the basic premise, if not us, then who? As a student advocacy organization, we're able to take a very strong stance on issues and really call out bad actors and really stand up for students. And so that's sort of where we approach the textbooks campaign from. The biggest issue that resonates with students is affordability. No student likes having to pay $250 for a textbook. No student likes to get $5 back for that textbook at the end of the semester. So a lot of the times when we're engaging students and we're talking to them about the issue, the most effective way to approach it is through the affordability lens. And so what I want to talk about today is just some of the more specific ways to actually engage students on campus. The first way is to engage them as volunteers. And the easiest way to do this is to hold simple events on campus, encourage students to pull an event together. These can be as simple as a table outside the campus bookstore where the students can talk to passerby about how much they've spent on textbooks, and they can create a graph. And actually, if you go forward a couple slides, let's see, right there, back one. you can see these create just really incredibly effective visuals, and you should save them or take a picture of them. Don't just do it for the purpose of doing it. But events like this will build momentum and increase awareness on campus. And they'll also grow the potential for the campus to become involved in open textbooks, because you generate volunteers. Other students see this. Other students realize, yes, I don't like getting ripped off by my textbook publishers, and they want to get involved in the campaign. So you can go from simple events like this to more complicated events like the Textbooks Rebellion. I think if we go forward 2 slides, right here. That's our hero, the textbook rebel. A few years ago, we put together a nationwide tour. We went to 40 campuses with these giant mascots. This is just the good guy, the open textbook. There was also a very mean, fearsome-looking $200 textbook dressed up like Mr. Monopoly almost. And they battled it out on college campuses all over the country. They drove 9,000 miles. They generated 100 media hits. And were really able to just build the presence of the open textbooks movement on the campuses that they went to and nationally as a whole. So there's definitely different types of events you can do. If you want to go back a couple slides. One more. This is a used textbooks graveyard. When publishers publish new editions, students find they're unable to sell their textbooks back. So you can do really simple, this is actually a more intense event where they actually did makeup and things. But there's lots of ways to actually just raise the awareness, get more students involved, and build the profile of the campaign. So that's the first level, and then I think the next level is to actually train students as activists. And with this, you want to engage them in a little higher level of thinking than just the affordability. And you want to talk to them more about the narrative of open textbooks, why there is a problem, why textbooks cost so much, and actually engage them in the solution and talk to them about why open textbooks are such an ideal way to move in the future. And for this, one of the things we've done is developed a set of materials that allow students to learn about the campaign and prepare to actually have a one-on-one meeting with a faculty member to talk to them about open textbooks. Our staff will actually train and engage with the students. Faculty members can do this too. Just have a practice pitch conversation where a student goes in and talks to another faculty member about the open textbook that's available for their class. And the good thing about this is that it grows your movement. It generates cost savings for students when faculty decide to sign on. And it just helps build your contact list, more professors to reach out to. And the content of these meetings can be different depending on what the purpose is or the availability of open textbooks for their course. You can talk to professors about reading and reviewing open textbooks that are out there. Establishing quality of the materials that are already out there is really important. You can talk to them about adopting or pledging to adopt an open textbook once one becomes available for their course. Or if it's someone really supportive, you can talk to them about actually publishing an open textbook. And that's probably a more detailed conversation. And then I think there's a third level, which is actually training students to become advocates for themselves and engaging them on sort of the broader conversation and talking to them about the OER movement as a whole. And we talk about students because they're such an important and a powerful messenger on the topic. 7 out of 10 students have skipped buying a textbook for their class because they can't afford it. We know students who haven't even been able to take the classes that they want because the textbooks were too expensive. So there's a tremendous opportunity for students to talk to decision makers, to sit down with campus administration, to talk to their senators and their congressmen about the problem and what they can do to help. And this is a little bit more of a larger investment because you're actually engaging them on the movement as a whole and talking to them about the big picture. Just some examples, our students in California testified at a hearing that helped advance the open textbooks bill that the California State Legislature passed. They also they included open textbooks as part of their lobby day. So they went in and sat down with staff and decision makers' offices and talked to them about the issue. So there's a lot of different levels at which students can get involved. And as faculty and as leaders on campus, there's a lot of ways that you can actually help support and develop those students as leaders. So that's the basic overview of what we do, and I guess I'll turn it back to Nicole.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ethan. So I want to ask one question of our panelists quickly and then open it up to the audience. So I think really, I want to go to Nick first. Nick has done an amazing job building an international coalition of student organizations and working with those students to engage on these issues. Nick, what can you tell the audience about what the most effective ways to work with students are?
Yeah, so I think in terms of messaging, one of the things that we learned, sort of what kind of messaging works most effectively, and for us it's really been sort of exposing the cost of academic research journals. I guess they're similar to textbooks in a way. Most people don't realize the price tag that comes along with research journals. That there are journals that cost more than $5,000 or $10,000 a year for a single subscription. And so I think exposing that figure along with how much our universities spend on bulk large subscriptions to these journals, and a lot of universities spend millions of dollars, and students don't know that because they don't see the price tag when they're looking online. So I think that is a really effective sort of piece of messaging. It also would be effective with OER as well, so emphasizing the cost savings. Also for us, the fact that most research is publicly funded is one of our largest talking points with students, and the fact that we pay for this research in the first place and that we don't get access to the most important thing, the results on the end. It's something that's resonated really well with students, and I think has parallels with OER as well in terms of the cost savings that can accrue to the educational system as a whole if we switch to an OER model. Then I guess third and finally, another piece of messaging that we use is sort of highlighting the fact that their sort of colleagues in the other parts of the world in the global south and low and middle income countries have face much higher access barriers than they do in getting access to the research and literature. That while it might be very common for students even at a wealthy institution here in the U.S. to run into articles that they can get access to, it's much more difficult for students in the global south, and making them realize that they're actually in a place of privilege and that we should be doing as much as possible to make this information much more easily available. And again, I think that parallels directly with OER. We work with a lot of students from low and middle income countries, and they do face much higher challenges in getting access to educational materials as well, and educational materials that they can actually own and write in and keep. And so I think those all three work for open access and have worked for us, but would also work for OER as well. And then just one last thing to fit in is we always try to connect our students with sort of experts in their local context, which for us has always been librarians, because librarians are the ones that have to pay the bills for academic research journals, and so tend to be by and large very supportive of open access and sort of understand the context within their sort of their institution. And so it's really helpful to connect students with a local expert that can give them that context when they're trying to put a campaign together.
Great. So I want to turn it over to the audience now for any questions about student organizing and how you can engage students. Yes?
Hi, everyone. I'm from Tidewater Community College, and we have stood up this textbook-free degree in business administration. And our communication has primarily been to those students that have declared the business administration degree, and not to our student government. Because I am from a 2-year institution, not to sell our student government short, but there's a whole host of, it's very difficult to get a sustained focus. We're multi-campus, they're kind of fractured themselves. So I guess my question is, Anne, let me throw one thing else. I thought your idea with the activities is very interesting, but we have to be very careful because we have contracts with bookstores. And while our academic VP is very supportive, it does us no good to upset our finance vice president after we incite a demonstration in front of our bookstore. So, we're walking kind of a fine line there. So my question to you is specifically with the community college. I think it would be best if we gave them kind of a very specific task after we introduced them. What would you suggest for a community college, kind of SGA, short-term, lots of turnover? And for community college, what group specifically do you think it would be best for us to say, when we pitch to them what we'd like, what's going on, we would like to plug them into X group. What group would that be?
I'll defer to my colleagues who have more
Yeah,
experience with
I'm-
Yeah. So one thing I should mention, I probably would not do this outside the
Yeah, I'm not thinking so, yeah.
We actually work, we have developed a relatively good relationship with college bookstores and the National Association of College Stores. In terms of open textbooks, we definitely don't want to be putting the blame on them.
Right.
And I think that's part of our narrative about open textbooks is why the costs are so high. When we definitely look more towards the publisher or something. In terms of the groups to engage on campus, student governments are definitely good, even at a 2-year institution. We work on a pretty wide variety of campuses, and students can leave this as a legacy and actually pass off the reins and do something like passing a student government resolution and having a meeting with the academic affairs or the student affairs personnel. The students at the University of Maryland just helped create a system-wide initiative to promote open textbook use. And even though some of the students who helped create the campaign have moved on, the Board of Regents is still working on that and organizing around it.
Well, our academic VP is very supportive, so I guess I'm trying to figure out where's the best place to push them after that. Would it be the president? Would it be outside the institution? Would it be, I don't know.
I think it'd be both.
Okay.
Engaging on a community system-wide is definitely a great way to go. Approaching the other academic affairs VPs, and then reaching out to state legislators.
Have you had any student government organizations, sorry, I don't mean to be asking all these questions, engage really well with the community, business leaders, foundations, anything like that? Have you seen any success in that regard?
Not so much on the open textbooks issue.
Okay.
It's just such a campus centrally focused sort of campaign. We really mostly engage with just
Okay.
administrations and students.
Thank you.
I have a comment that I think might help bridge the gap, and it's something Nicole and I talked about just a little bit, but have the PERCs focused at all on what I consider the middle ground between those two camps, which is the world of customization, and in OER terms, it's the reuse and adapt side. Because there's a lot of data that says students object less to the price per se than to buying something that wasn't used in class. Bookstores also like custom. And OER will never really get to scale until people are reusing and adapting. So it does seem like there is a very, very great opportunity, not just to call on the professor at the next level, but to actually help drive customization, whether it's of proprietary materials, of OER materials, combinations of those materials. And that seems to be win-win for every stakeholder. So again, do you have any plans in that regard?
Yeah, the customization aspect is definitely something we've been introducing into our message, mostly because we're finally starting to see some data come out that shows that customization actually improves the quality of learning in classes. So we've definitely been introducing that into our narrative, and it's definitely part of the sort of the higher levels of engagement where we're actually going in and talking to faculty. In terms of actually having students engage in the customization aspect, I'm not sure if that's what you're saying. I'm not
Well,
sure.
yeah, there's that hand-holding of just mapping the syllabus to what they want, and it's actually really easy if you're familiar with any technology, but just getting past the barrier of getting started. A student can do that. And someone I met at this conference today was saying maybe faculty training on using technology in schools, and they wisely train the students and the faculty at the same time. And then the students, when the teacher or professor forgets how to do it, the students remember, and the students then become the help desk, basically. So anyway, I think that there is a real opportunity there to do massive student training, and then students become advocates, and they really drive us to scale. So.
Next question, Beth?
Yes. A couple of related questions here. Trying to be brief. I think your point's well taken about how overpriced journals are. It's absolutely ridiculous. And yet at the same time, when it comes to textbooks, part of a scholar's motivation, besides contribution to their field, is making a little bit extra money, especially when you work in academia for a very moderate salary. how do you guys respond to that type of perspective in terms of they're definitely overpriced and whether it's bookstores or the author or the publishing company, everybody may be making a little bit too much money and there's too many middle persons, so to speak. But it's kind of like, we probably don't want neurosurgeons making 60 grand a year, to save costs. So isn't there something to be said for motivating scholars of tomorrow?
Yeah, so I think that's an absolutely valid point. I think journal articles are completely distinct from, from textbooks, right? Because journal articles have always been produced without the expectation of payment. So scholars produce that so that they can advance their career and get recognized for, the advancements that they're making. But, obviously, as you said, textbooks require an order of magnitude or two more effort, than a scholarly article, and that has to be compensated for in some way. Certainly you get rewards, in terms of your career for publishing a textbook, especially if it's adopted widely. But there's a strong sort of need for financial compensation as well, given the amount of time that goes into it. And I think there have been really interesting models, to sort of pay authors, what they deserve, up front, like the OpenStax models that, they compensate authors up front, but it's not necessarily, I know Nicole's more well-versed in how sort of how the financial streams go, but I think, there are sustainable models for producing OER and compensating authors, in the way that they need to be to produce those works.
And there have been some great sessions at this conference that just go into the specifics of that, and there will be more tomorrow. So it appears as though we are out of time. So I want to thank Nick and Ethan and invite all of you to stick around if you want to chat more.
We need zombie demonstration.
You also have to look at what she's